Christ according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
When Jesus entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, "What authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority?" Jesus said to them, "I will also ask you one question. If you tell me the answer, then I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin?" And they argued with one another. If we say from heaven, he will say to us, "Why then did you not believe him?" But if we say of human origin, we are afraid of the crowd, for all regard John as a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And he said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things. What do you think? A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work in the vineyard today.' He answered, 'I will not.' But later he changed his mind and went. The father went to the second and said the same, and he answered, 'I go, sir.' But he did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father?" They said, "The first." Jesus said to them, "Truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are going into the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed him. And even after you saw it, you did not change your minds and believe him." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Did you see? So in the Gospel of Matthew, just prior to today's reading, what's happened is that Jesus has come into Jerusalem, his triumphal entry into the city of Jerusalem. And when he's come, people are proclaiming him Messiah. And he goes to the temple, and he overturns the tables of the money changers. And later that day, he's out walking, and he goes to a fig tree to get a fig, and it doesn't produce any. And with a word, he withers the tree right there. He's doing these signs. And so it's in this context that the scribes and the high priests come to him. Say, "By what authority are you doing these things?" Now, the high priests were kind of the top people in the Jewish hierarchy. They were descended straight back to Aaron and Moses, and they were in charge. And the scribes were the most well-educated among the Jews. These were the people in power. They'd been in power for a long time. And they had a structure. And they said, "By what authority are you doing these things?" I likened it the other day in Bible study to saying, what if Carl just stood up and said, "I'm going to start preaching every Sunday, whether you all want to hear it or not," which of course we wouldn't, but the point being, somebody in the church might say, "Well, who gave you that authority? Well, you're just taking this. We have a structure here. People go to seminary and ordain, and you don't just get to stand up and do that in our church." You know, that's kind of the question. Where they're coming from is not necessarily from an evil place. This is how we do things. And you're not doing it that way. Who gave you the authority? Nobody made you a rabbi. You don't have any official title. Who said you could do this? And so Jesus understands their question, so he asks one of his own. He asks them about John. Is John's baptism from heaven or earth? And you heard their debate. And in the end, they say, "We don't know. We don't know." Now that right there is very telling of where they were at in this. Because their issue wasn't necessarily with truth, wasn't necessarily standing up for what was right. They said, "We don't know," because they were afraid that the people might get upset with them. They were afraid that the people might reject them. In other words, they were more concerned with holding on to power and authority than they were with standing up for any truth or right. We're saying this is what we believe. Now, this is a pretty common thing among human beings. We tend to hold on tightly to those things which we believe give us influence, give us comfort, give us authority. And this isn't just money. This isn't just power. This happens at every socioeconomic level. We want to hold on to that which we believe props us up above wherever we see is below us. But Jesus gives them a parable to think about. He says, man has two sons, goes to the first and says, go into the field and work. And the first says, no, I'm not going to do it. Now, in our society today, that's still disrespectful, right? For a kid to say no to their parents. But in that society, this would have been a really big deal. Particularly for a grown, if you send them out in the field, they're old enough to know that. This would have been a tremendous sign of disrespect in that society that would be often result in that child being kicked out of the home. I mean, it's at that level. Jesus uses this example. Because the first one says no. But then later, he changes his mind and goes into the field to work. Now, I don't claim to read Greek, but I can read the English that other people write that do read Greek. And several times I've read that they said that that's really not a good translation of that. But what it should be is that the oldest son changed his heart, changed what he cared about. So at first he said no, but then he changed his heart. He changed what he cared about. And he went into the field. Now the second son, when asked, says, yes, I'll go, but then he doesn't. Now in that society, in many ways, oddly enough, that wouldn't have been seen as great a disrespect as saying no. But the point Jesus is making here is that it doesn't matter what we say as much as what we do. It doesn't matter if we do all the right things on the surface. What matters is if we ultimately change our heart, change what matters to us, and listen to God's call. You see, we can come to church every Sunday morning. I can come to church every Sunday morning. I can read my Bible. I can put on my collar, do all these things, teach. None of that means that I'm listening to God. None of that means that I'm right with God. And that's the point Jesus is making. It's not about the outward signs. It's not about all these things that we've clinged to all of our lives to say, okay, I'm okay. Or I'm at least better than these other people. It's not relative. He's saying what matters is whether we choose to listen to God's calling in our lives. And that's why he says to him, he says, truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes will enter heaven before you. So in that society, he's bringing up kind of what people look down on the most. I don't know what the equivalent today would be, probably tax collectors. I don't know what else. Kidding. But you get the idea. So these people that by all your kind of standards are looked down upon, all those things that you hold so dear that make you right, self-righteous, all those things, said those people are going to enter the kingdom of heaven before you because they chose to listen. They chose to listen to God's call. They chose to receive forgiveness of their sins, to recognize where they had come short, and to seek God's forgiveness. It's one of the great gifts of Christianity Some say it sets it apart from other religions. I don't know enough about others to say, but I do know that for Christianity, what matters is from this point forward. It doesn't matter what you were this morning when you woke up. It doesn't matter what you were a year ago, 10 years ago. It doesn't matter what horrible things you've done, what horrible things others think you've done. None of that matters. All that matters is this moment forward. Because God is calling each and every one of us, regardless of our past, regardless of what we see as our strengths, our weaknesses, God is calling. And the only thing that matters is, will we listen? Will we answer that call? Or will we hold on to all those old ways, those old signs, those old things that we've used to prop ourselves up all these years? Let us pray. Dear Lord, I thank you for this day, for this opportunity to come together to worship you. I pray that you would help us to let go of those outward signs and rather look inwardly. Help us to know what it means to answer your call, to hear your voice, to be the people you've called us to be. Help us to seek you in all that we do, to love one another as you've loved us. All this we ask in your Son's holy name.